Hey guys, what's going on? Mike the Caveman Q here again from Paleo Problem Long Island, MikeTheCaveman.com, and we have another edition of our Monday Nights with Mike live stream Facebook Q&A. And yeah, so ask me anything health related, and we'll get started right now. I'll wait for you to put some questions down in the comments. But while I'm waiting for those questions to come in, I'm actually going to start out with one my good friend Michael Reinhardt posted on my wall earlier. He said that he unfortunately won't be able to attend the live portion. So we're going to talk a little bit about whey protein and its ability to affect ketosis. So will whey protein in your coffee in the morning affect a ketogenic diet? While I'm covering this one, you can start putting your questions in and we'll cover it from there. So Michael's question was essentially, will adding whey protein to a coffee and or shake, will that negatively affect ketosis? Because the fact of the matter is, whey protein in and of itself is partially insulinogenic, meaning it can cause the release of insulin. So he wants to know, whey protein, I've read, elicits an insulin response. If I'm ketotic, will whey in my coffee kick me out of ketosis? So let's discuss ketosis. I brought it up in yesterday's video regarding the raspberry ketones, and I dug a little bit into biochemistry. If you watch that video, it gets a little crazy, and unfortunately I'm going to have to do that today. So bear with me. If science scares you, I'm sorry, but that's kind of what I do. So essentially what we're talking about, ketosis. When we're talking about ketogenic diet, we're talking about restricting carbohydrates and, there's a big and, moderately restricting protein. Depending on the level we're trying to get to, depends on how far we actually need to restrict. So if we're talking about a general ketogenic diet, just for general weight loss, performance, cognitive benefits, we're looking at like a 60% fat, 60 to 70% fat, 20 to 30% protein, and no more than 5 to maybe 10% carbohydrate, and that's mostly from fibrous vegetables. Now, the reason why gets pretty deep, and this part's usually glossed over. Most people are concerned about the insulin, but the thing is, insulin really isn't the key when it comes to ketosis. The key, I know, has to deal with something called oxaloacetate. Now, if you remember from biology, the Krebs cycle, the citric acid cycle, TCA cycle, it's got 4,000 other names. Essentially, what happens is, that's one of the primary ways our body produces energy, produces ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The way it does that is it goes through a series of reactions in that cycle, and at the end of the day, you get ATP generated, created. Now, here's the deal. Pyruvate is an acid that comes into the cycle, and it meets up with oxaloacetate. Now, those two are needed to go through the cycle. The main sources of oxaloacetate, or the primary source generally, is in fact sugar. So the glucose provides the oxaloacetate. However, most amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, can also provide the oxaloacetate, or one of the other steps on the Krebs cycle. So, by eating protein, if you eat enough of it, you can produce the oxaloacetate. Now, the key to ketosis is having the oxaloacetate and the acetyl-CoA. So you want a buildup of that acetyl-CoA and a decrease in the oxaloacetate. I really hope you're still with me and awake, you know. But essentially, what we're talking about is in the case of protein, you want to make sure that it's not excessively high. In the case of sugar, you want that down all the way. So by removing those two, you remove the oxaloacetate source, and in the process, now the fats have to go somewhere else. So they produce the acetyl-CoA and they end up getting converted down to the ketogenic pathway. That's a really long and detailed side note on basically the insulin isn't the key problem, okay? The little bit of raise you're going to get in insulin from whey protein is insignificant compared to the amount of oxaloacetate you actually need to produce more sugars. So the production of gluconeogenesis, which is the production of sugars from protein, requires the oxaloacetate and requires the acetyl-CoA. Pull out the oxaloacetate, it's not a problem. And again, I'm going really deep into this just because it's an oversimplification more often than not, and Michaels was really concerned about that. He's a biochem type guy like myself. Essentially, don't take in too much whey and you'll be all right. Don't go and crush 5 scoops and it won't be a problem. As long as carbohydrate intake is low enough, that little bit of insulin secretion isn't a problem. Particularly in his case, he's taking it with the nutrients from Catholic Nutrition as well as the skinny fat, which is an MCT oil, and that's the other K. So, ketosis really is an abundance of those acetyl-CoA groups and a lack of deficiency of oxaloacetate. So you limit the protein and carbohydrate to limit the oxaloacetate, and you take in extra acetyl groups through that ketones. The MCTs can only be converted to the acetyl-CoA, whereas the carbohydrates and protein, the gluconeogenic amino acids can be converted to oxaloacetate or one of the other derivatives. I know, super confusing. For basic purposes, just avoid carbohydrate and minimize protein. For really nitty-gritty, worry about the oxaloacetate, Mike. That's the long and the short of it, and that was definitely longer than I intended it to go. I could go longer if we had to and really dive more. I really don't want to right now because I'd like the people that are on right now actually be able to appreciate this. So, Mike, let me know on the replay what you think of that. That being said, let's go right to the next question. So, Susanna says, what is kefir? Think of it as yogurt on steroids. It's essentially a liquid probiotic beverage. You take, rather than taking like 2 to 5 strains, you're taking upwards of like 23 strains of bacteria. And because of that, more proteins and more sugars are getting broken down. In the process, it's a more of a liquidy beverage. And the benefit of kefir versus yogurt versus kombucha versus sauerkraut and kimchi is each one of them is going to provide different probiotic. We've talked about fermented foods not actually giving you a probiotic effect for the most part, but it's going to provide different organic acids in the end. So you're getting different enzymes, different organic acids, technically different strains of bacteria, different probiotics going in. So the benefit of kefir is that it has more strains and it has different strains. I would consume both. If you can handle dairy, then yeah, definitely go with kefir. Do a little yogurt as well. Interestingly, people who are lactose intolerant, there's actually literature supporting the use of quality kefir to reintroduce lactose tolerance. Basically, make you be able to digest lactose in people who are clinically diagnosed as lactose intolerant. So there's actually some really cool data regarding kefir. I would definitely look into it. For those who can't tolerate dairy, even that style, there are coconut milk kefirs, and so I would definitely look into that as well. Okay, Tori says, there's a lot of controversy regarding breastfeeding. You think it's necessary for optimal child development? Absolutely. Regarding, I did a video on this the other day. I'll post you to that one too. So the kefir one I'll post you to. The breastfeeding I'll definitely post you to. I have 2 on that actually. But specifically the introduction of the maternal microbiome to the child. When your baby's born, what happens is mom's bacteria, first through vaginal birth ideally, and then through breastfeeding, is passed on to the child. That is the main source of a child's microbiome. That's where you develop it from. It's from mom. Now, that being said, what's your concerns regarding the controversy of it? That's where I get I'm a little confused on that. So, Tori, if you want to elaborate on that a little more regarding what the controversy actually is, but there's no question. If you breastfeed, you're going to see reductions in allergy and autoimmune long term. If you are unable to produce enough, your diet's insufficient or otherwise, then I would definitely look into including some type of probiotic and or yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi into the early introductions of solid foods. And I would include it with whatever little breast milk you could have. Excuse me. But if you could follow that up with what the controversy you're putting in regarding about. So Joe says, I remember you saying something about foods damaging your body for certain durations of time. Is there a general time frame that bad foods will damage for? Does it depend on the food, assuming you are healthy to start? Yes, so different foods can last in your system for different amount of times. That's the same for any compound, any chemical can last in your system for a short amount of time, or it can be metabolized a lot longer. Certain things, in, out, gone. let's say gluten. Gluten takes about 14 days for its metabolites to be removed. Okay, so that's a common one. If you are going grain-free or even just gluten-free, you're gonna have to go at least minimum 2 weeks, because every time you pop more in, you're gonna have a problem. So yes, it is different for each food. Each food has a slightly different time frame in terms of how long it's going to be. But the long and the short of it is, eat real food more often than not. You get the tangential exposure, your body should be able to handle it. How much stress you can handle depends on what the rest of your diet and lifestyle factors look like. Less stress overall means you... lowering your stress overall means you can handle more stress overall. So make sure that load, the allostatic load, is super low. That way, when a short, acute spike of stress happens, it doesn't break your body. Okay? So I hope that helped you out on that one. Let's see. Tori now says, if you're trying to limit your salt intake due to swelling, is Himalayan salt still a good idea? Alternative to iodized table salt. 150%. Yes, absolutely. So, with that being said, with Himalayan salt, the whole purpose is, yes, it is still predominantly sodium chloride. However, it has plenty of other minerals in it. Depending on what you have, it can be upwards of 50 to 60 other trace minerals. So, definitely a better option. For somebody who's dealing with swelling and just general salt balance, I definitely look at increasing your potassium intake. Now, I have a whole video on that. I'll post up with that as well afterwards. But with potassium intake, your best source is weirdly beet greens. Beet greens are sneakily one of the healthiest foods on the planet in terms of micronutrient density. Just make sure you're lightly steaming it. But from there, things like avocados are incredible for potassium. Sweet potatoes are excellent as well. So, in terms of limiting salt, look at potassium. Potassium's super important. It's kind of like the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. It's a matter of balance of the two. We take in too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. On the salt end, more often than not, we're taking in too much sodium and not enough potassium. And we only focus on the one. So just like we're always trying to focus on restrict salt, versus saying take in more potassium, we do the same with the omega-3s. Say, supplement with fish oil, eat more fish, do this. Rather than saying, no, eat more fish, but also eliminate the grains, the legumes, and the grain-fed animals that are high in omega-6. So find that balance. So in the salt-potassium equation, find the balance on all those. And before I go to the next question, let me say hi to a couple people. Thanks, Joe, for coming in. Hey, Anna or Oliver. What's up, Steph? Susanna, Ozzy, James, Tavana, Shane. How you guys doing? All right, so again, more questions. I see a couple more already, but just pop the questions on in there, and we'll keep them rolling as I finish up with one. I'll move on to the next. As Tori says, going back to the breastfeeding one, regarding how long one should be breastfeeding. But I was really just curious about development. Okay, so personally, I believe that at bare minimum, we're looking at 6 months of breastfeeding. And a lot of mothers I know, both A, have issues with production and they kind of get a little more concerned, it's a touchy subject because obviously a mother-child relationship is a super tight bond, and a lot of times mothers can be sensitive of you saying that, oh, well, I'm not doing the right thing for baby. I'm doing the best I can. And I appreciate it. I truly do. I'm not trying to attack mothers who don't do it for at least 6 months. The idea is make the best choices you can on that. However, if it's at all possible you're still producing, or if you're not, find ways to produce more. Either way, 6 months is like that solid line cutoff. From there, the next thing we want to do is actually go upwards of 2 years. As crazy as that sounds, I'd be saying is 6 months to 2 years, I think, is the ideal time range when we're talking about breastfeeding. Solid food introduction shouldn't really happen for 4 to 6 months, so there should be almost exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 years of life. 6 years. Don't be breastfeeding your kid for 6 years. This isn't Game of Thrones, no Sweet Robin. But no, 6 months of life is what I meant. Tori, should salt be cut out altogether? We'll bounce back and forth on your questions. Should salt be cut out altogether? Absolutely not. Sodium is essential for the body properly, as is chloride. Chloride, you need to produce hydrogen chloride, which is one of your main gastric acids, so you need that. No, definitely do not cut out salt. completely. And yes, Robin Aaron, Liza Tully is no go. That's what I was saying with Sweet Robin. Absolutely not. No breastfeeding until 12. No. 6 months. Okay, Stephanie. This is one you asked me before. This one's a nice tricky one. Is there a difference, or what is the difference, I'm assuming, between colloidal and ionic silver, both in terms of effectiveness, pros and cons of both? So that one definitely is a much more in-depth question in terms of answering all of those, but essentially the biggest difference. So ionic means that the hydrogen and the electron, or the proton, which in most cases is the hydrogen, in the case when we're talking about charges, and we're getting into some, we're getting deep into some chemistry right now. Essentially, you have electrons, you have protons. You have positive charge, proton, negative charge, electron. When electrons are removed, we end up with a positive charge. When it's back in, we end up with we add it back in, it's back to negative. So essentially, what we're talking about in ionic silver is that an electron has been moved. An electron has been removed. Because of that, it's now highly reactive. Whereas colloidal silver is a nanoparticle, so it's basically shrunken down silver particles, and it is not that reactive in terms of with other chemicals. Now, because of that, the thought on how colloidal silver works is that because it's unreactive, and colloidal gold is thought to do similar things, but colloidal silver is obviously A, cheaper, and B, has more time-testedness in terms of its use. The idea is that it's going to get into the cells of the pathogens, and because it's non-reactive, because they can't do anything with it, it basically kills them from the inside out. So, I have seen effectiveness for colloidal silver for 25 years. I used it as a child. In terms of antibacterial, antiviral, I think it's incredible. Make sure you're getting it from a quality source. Don't just buy it from the guy down the street. I don't really recommend that, unless it's me. I mean, I'm the guy down the street, I guess, to some people. But normally, just make sure you know the quality of the source. Don't start making it yourself more often than not. In terms of ionic, though, because it has that electron removed and it is highly reactive, once it gets into your system, it usually reacts with chloride, which is the most prevalent anion, in the body. Yeah. The most prevalent anion in the body, and as such, they react, making that silver now unavailable to the body. So it no longer can get into the pathogenic bacteria, is the thought on it. So in terms of pros and cons, if you're looking for that antimicrobial, antiviral effect, I would definitely go with a quality colloidal silver. So hopefully I gave you a little answer there. Ozzy, can we talk more about acid reflux? I've talked about that on a couple of occasions. What specifically about acid reflux? So if you can give me a little more about what you're looking for exactly for the short term. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about what are the causes. So if you haven't caught my acid reflux video, I'll post that in the description. I'll post that in reply to that comment. But for those of you on right now, if you haven't seen that video, essentially while we think of acid reflux being too much acid, you feel the burning and you think, oh, I have too much acid, I need to reduce that. That's not exactly the case. And unfortunately, that's the reason why most medications that are being used are ineffective long term. Antacids, proton pump inhibitors, what they're doing is they're basically a band-aid. They make you feel good for a little bit by buffering that acid that's in your esophagus. But they're doing more damage long term because acid reflux is generally the result of insufficient stomach acid. You don't have enough. So what's happening is your stomach acid generally is a way to prevent pathogens, bad things, bad microbes from getting into your body. So the hydrogen, the acidity of it, actually goes and kills those bacteria on the way in. However, if you have insufficient, you don't have enough stomach acid, what happens is now those bacteria can start creeping up. So they start in the colon and they creep up to the small intestine. And from there, they can actually creep back up to the stomach sometimes. H. pylori, which causes ulcers. That's one of the ones that can actually start setting up shop in the stomach. It's not supposed to in high concentrations. So, going back one step though, going back to that small intestine. When it creeps back to that small intestine, generally what happens is bacteria that produce and release hydrogen are overgrown. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those bacteria overgrow, they release a bunch of hydrogen, which causes a little bit of like essentially the bacteria burp, and the release of gas goes back up the esophageal sphincter. So it goes there, causes a little bit of a lapse there, and that in turn causes the acid to kick back and causes a lapse up there. Excuse me. So that lapse of the esophageal sphincter, what happens is the gas pushes up, and that little bit of acid that is left in the stomach ends up getting kicked into your esophagus, causing irritation and inflammation in your esophagus, causing the pain, causing you want to relieve it. So yeah, you take that antacid, it coats the lining, and you feel great for a little bit. Unfortunately, that in the process, what you're going to do is you're going to lower your stomach acid even more. So, what are the best options for acid reflux? For immediate relief, most people do very well with apple cider vinegar. The reason being, it's going to reintroduce that acid, so it's going to help to kick out those bacteria that are there. It's going to help to reacidify the stomach. Now, there is a small contingent who have acid reflux as a result of a histamine intolerance, and that's a whole other question. We've talked about that. I did a video on whether fermented foods may not be for you, so I'll post that link over there as well. But essentially, in that case, apple cider, those are the non-responders to apple cider vinegar. Those are the people who take it and are like, what happened? I don't feel better. That's generally because you have a histamine intolerance, and that what's happening is the apple cider vinegar, when it's fermented, it produces those histamines, and now you're actually feeding those same bacteria. So in some people, small percentage of the population, apple cider vinegar is not the answer. In that case, I'm looking more at things like charcoal, and as well as things like psyllium husk that are they're not resistant starch. It's actually a fiber, so it's insoluble fiber. So in that case, you're going to want to go to things that are going to feed the probiotic bacteria. They'll be prebiotic. You're also going to want to look at getting a quality probiotic. So something like Megaspore will help with recolonizing your gut and helping to get rid of that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. The next thing you're going to want to look at is something like systemic enzymes, things like Fibrenza. Those will help with the breakdown of different foods, and in the process, actually ensure that you're getting it through and help with healing the gut overall. Things like bone broth are going to be a good idea, gelatin, DGL, deglycerinated licorice, that's going to help to heal the mucosal lining of the gut, and essentially the irritation that kickback of acid you're feeling in the acid reflux, generally it's because the mucosal lining is gone. So we have mucus from our nose all the way down through our esophagus. It's in our larynx and pharynx as well, down to our lungs, but on the esophageal end, it goes down to our stomach, and there's mucus everywhere. And it's a good thing, generally. Now, we want to make sure we have it. In the case of acid reflux, the acid is actually eating through that lining, and we no longer have sufficient amounts, causing the irritation and inflammation, and no good. So the DGL will actually help with the repair of the mucosal lining. All right. Because Ozzy didn't go and follow that up with more specifically what you wanted. Hopefully that covered most of what you could have wanted. Joe, is there any legit research out there on eliminating food allergies? Absolutely, Joe. The key to eliminating food allergies really comes down to healing your gut, okay? Eliminate those foods, particularly short term, but long term, fix your gut, period. So allergies, generally speaking, we're talking about an overreactive response by the immune system to something that doesn't belong in the gut, or rather, doesn't belong in your body. And how did it get there? Damage to your gut. So, generally speaking, the tight junctions of your intestines prevent things from getting through. You have a nice brush border, okay? Then, different things can cause damage. So what happens is, little hole here, and little hole here. So different things can cause that. Lectins, saponins, gluten, all that fun stuff. So, when those damages occur, different things can get through. Depending on how much damage you have, depends on how big the things you can get through are. So, proteins from certain foods, they are problematic because they shouldn't be getting through. Proteins are huge molecules. They do not belong in the blood intact, okay? They're supposed to be broken down in the stomach initially by both the gastric acid as well as the proteases. Okay, those should be breaking down the proteins before they ever make it to the small intestine. Now, things like gluten, casein, and several other protein proteins are problematic because for whatever reason they're not getting broken down in the stomach. Could be low stomach acid, could be part of it. And then when they get to there, because of the damage to that brush border, they're able to get through intact into your body. When they're in your body, what happens is your body sees it, and your immune system in particular sees that and says, no good, I don't like that, need to get rid of that, so we have to attack it. So it builds up antibodies. And now there are other proteins that are already in your body that mimic or look similar to those proteins that didn't belong in the first place. So now, every time your body sees that immune tissue or sees that tissue in your body, it attacks it. So different autoimmune conditions, in the case, say, let's say, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Something got in, your body now sees your thyroid tissue, and it looks similar to something else that got in once before, and it says, let's attack that, because that's a bad thing. It doesn't belong here. So it basically oversensitized your immune system to the point where the way I like to use the analogy for that is if you had a smoke alarm and you had it set to too high of a sensitivity, every time you lit a candle, the fire department would get called because you say, smoke, fire, no good. So heal the gut, and ideally what's going to happen is the immune system isn't going to be overly sensitized anymore. Your smoke alarm is going to be properly set now. So how do we get rid of food allergies? Fix your gut. Talk about that all the time, I think. Maybe. Alrighty. Joe, yes. Haha, Suzanne, okay, that's in relation to the eliminating food allergies. So yeah, so the biggest thing is focusing on the gut. Alex, what's up? Catherine, how you doing? So, yeah, we're closing in on that half an hour mark, like I like to keep these generally to. But if anybody has any more questions, I'd love to kick the last couple of answers around, and hopefully, we get it going. But this one's been a pretty in-depth, sciencey one. Hopefully, there wasn't too much attrition. Hopefully, it actually helped you out, and I wasn't speaking too crazy. I don't think I wasn't. I'm pretty sure I was, is what I mean. Either way, yeah, so if you have any last questions, that'd be great. Hi, we'll watch this and miss most. Well, woo, science. Well, Captain, do you have any questions before I get out of here? We covered a lot of fun topics. We talked about the ability of whey protein to cause issues with ketosis, and we talked about acid reflux and colloidal silver versus ionic silver, and breastfeeding, and food allergies, a whole bunch of things, kefir. Tavon, do I have a more in-depth video on Hashimoto's? I do not, actually, surprisingly. Which is funny because I have a couple of clients I work with who are dealing with Hashimoto's, but I don't know that I have one dedicated to it. I guess we'll have to add that to the list. So we got Hashimoto's added to the list. Maybe I'll do a colloidal silver one. Might have to do that one. Looking back, I don't know, the kefir, that's probably a good dedicated one. Like I said, I've done dedicated kombucha ones. But yeah, we're looking at doing a dedicated Hashimoto's. Definitely a good topic to cover. Honestly, I've been seeing great benefit with the usuals, Same stuff we always talk about at Rebel, because the gut really comes down to it. Hashimoto's, we're looking at an autoimmune thyroid condition. Fix your gut and give the thyroid support at the same time, and we should see good benefit. Don't overstress. Don't go into a true ketogenic diet. That's where I like to see. That's where I feel like something like Keto OS comes in really handy, because you can go a low-ish carb, but still not destroy your thyroid in terms of T4, T3 conversion. You can actually produce thyroid hormone still, because you're getting adequate carbohydrate intake, but you're still minimizing the deleterious effects of insulin, which isn't really the big key we talked about earlier. Either way, I like the addition of a Keto OS in thyroid conditions. We haven't been able to find Stevia. Joe, what flavor do you want? I'll bring it to the gym like tomorrow or whatever. Okay? So, in terms of stevia, I'll do that, or I'll send you a link. Either way. Yeah. I think that pretty much gives it a wrap, though. Either way, though, guys, thank you for coming on tonight. I appreciate everybody that stopped by. I appreciate everybody that is going to watch the replay. Just, you know, I love the support. And just keep sending those questions. Go over to Instagram and Twitter. Follow me at Mike the Caveman over here on Facebook. I have my Paleo Problem Long Island page, and I try and share other things besides my content when I have the time to remember to. But beyond that, over on YouTube, would truly appreciate it. Subscribe. It's now Mike the Caveman. I actually, because we got to over 100, I now have it branded as Mike the Caveman, so I'll put a link to that, to the new channel description name, and please, if you could subscribe. I have MikeTheCaveman.com, which has been relatively inactive, but I have a couple ideas in mind for what we're going to be doing there. Be sure to check me out over Rebel Health Tribe. I'm going to be contributing some articles. I have one dropping at the beginning of next month about ketosis. Definitely check that out. And I am accepting some new clients right now. I'm not going too crazy, but if you want to reach out, if you really want to dial in whatever you have going on health-wise, reach out to me. I am currently accepting a couple more clients. But either way, hope to help you out, guys. You know what to do, and I'll see you tomorrow.